I heard of a man who had a choice to marry an opera singer who was very ugly, sang beautifully, and an uneducated cook who was very beautiful. He finally decided that he had better marry the opera singer because she would give him more prestige. So it was decided. First morning after the honeymoon, woke up, took a look at the opera singer, and he said, "For heaven's sake, sing!"
Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to week 57. So including today, we only have 3 more readings left. And it's a good thing we're coming to the end because the journal that I bought to take my notes in and stuff has run out of pages. I'm basically scribbling on the back part of the journal because I don't want to start a new one for only 3 more readings. But today we're going to be talking about reason. And every once in a while on my social media pages, I will get somebody who struggles with the reality that we can find the truth of something. Several weeks ago, I posted about how it is unique to Christianity that our Lord's name is used in vain. Nobody is taking Allah's name in vain, and Hindu gods, we don't hear them being used as cuss words in movies. But Jesus's name is often used in vain, and people take the name of God in vain, and it's very unique to Christianity. And I think it points to the truth of Christianity because the devil doesn't waste his time, worrying about other deities' names. He knows exactly whose name he wants to blaspheme. Anyway, this man came on and started arguing with me. And he said, how could you ever possibly know that? You've never lived in another country, and, you don't know that that's just unique here to the United States or to the Western world. And I said, well, I have lived in the East. I have lived in another country, so does that count? Does that count of having some proof? And, when we lived in Turkey, nobody used God's name in vain. And, one lady brought up, oh, well, that's just because they don't have freedom of speech there. But it's not as if the government was lurking around every corner. If they wanted to use his name in vain, they could have. It's just not something that they do. There's a very high level of respect for God's name and for Mary's name and even Jesus's name. And so, I have that experience of being in the country and seeing everybody use it very reverently. And, he had attacked me and didn't realize that I had lived in another country, a very different country from Western countries. So when I said that, then he's like, well, you haven't lived in every single country on earth to be able to claim that fact. I was like, well, neither have you. So how do you know that that's, true or not true? And it's just an example of how things go here in our modern world. We've got this idea in our head that the truth can't ever really be uncovered. And we set up these super high standards for people in order to try to give an example or show their experience or prove something. I wasn't trying to prove it necessarily. I was trying to make a point. And his standard was so high, I was never going to be able to cross over. First he attacked me that I didn't, know what it was like in other countries. And then I told him that I did. And then he was like, well, you haven't lived in a mall. And I was like, well, okay, well, I'm sorry I haven't lived in the mall. But he would never allow me to arrive at some kind of a reasonable conclusion. He just wasn't going to allow me to do that, which is oftentimes what we run into. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to talk to you guys on the other end about how I try to teach my kids that you can uncover the truth, that you can use reason. God has given it to us all. And, it's not something that's completely elusive, that it can be discovered. So our 3 key points are insight, light, and discoveries. Number 57, how noble in reason. Everyone coming into the world has one great light sealed upon him, which is reason, or the faculty of knowing the true and the right. Some have an additional light, which is that of faith. The latter are fortunate, inasmuch as they have the extra illumination for the problems of life. As the eye has not its own light, but needs the sun, so too the reason for its perfection needs the gift of faith. We have the same eyes at night as we have in the day, but we cannot see in darkness because we lack the additional light of the sun. The reason those with faith have a keener insight into values and a deeper moral sense is because they are blessed with a light others lack. But here we are concerned solely with first light or reason. In these days of propaganda, superstition, denial of intellect, the exaltation of sentiment, and the domination of instinct, it is well to remind ourselves of our dignity, as Shakespeare did in saying, "What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in action how like an angel, in apprehension how like a god." Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2. Every person in the world is illumined with the light of reason, which is a reflection of the divine wisdom. We are like so many volumes issuing from the divine press. To each is given the freedom to write on those pages, and thus do the autobiography of our character. Even though we write badly or well, indisputably stamped on the cover is the name of the divine author. Despite ink blots of moral value which are due to our moral carelessness, the divine watermark is stamped on each page, untouched by our poor scribbling. Reason manifests itself in different ways at different times. In the ancient world, it was art that made civilization and culture. In our world, it is science and technology. Art is the expression of beautiful ideals through the real. Michelangelo said that inside every block of marble is an admirable form. One need only hack away the non-essentials in order to reveal it. Science, however, is more concerned with law and order. Every new invention, every newly discovered law, whether in biology or astronomy or physics, is, in the truest sense of the word, a discovery. Columbus could not have discovered America if America was not there. A scientist actually unwraps a secret, a rhythm, a melody, a law that God already placed in the universe. As Michelangelo unwrapped marble, so the scientist unwraps what has been hidden in the cosmos since the beginning. Every scientist is a kind of proofreader. He's not the author of the law he enunciates. Few indeed are the great scientists who ever think so, even by confusing the carbon copy with the original. They know the difference between discovery and invention. Many have the vision of Wordsworth, who said that the meanest flower that blows could give thoughts that often lie too deep for tears. But such thoughts are not given to those who do not think and search for reason. The window lets in the light, but not to the blind. The scientist of our modern civilization has a blessed advantage over most men, for to him is given a deeper vision of creation. One great scientist, Eddington, became so enamored of his findings in mathematical physics that he ended up his scientific treatise with a chapter on mysticism. This was going too far, but at any rate, he did acknowledge with genes that all our scientific discoveries take us only to the edge of the picture. Then the philosopher must take over. Blessed is the one to whom the universe is not opaque like a curtain, but transparent as is a window, and to whom reason's author is seen behind every true act of reasoning. As George Herbert expressed it, a man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye, or if he pleaseth through it pass, and then the heavens espy. Apparently, in our day and age, truth is nowhere to be found. At least that's what we're told. There is no way to uncover the truth, we're told. You can't ever really arrive at an absolute truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. They can all be truths, even if they contradict each other. And what we've done is we've taken truth and just smushed it into a box, buried it somewhere where no one can find it. And our culture has just dusted off its hands and then marched off to immerse everyone in this world where everyone is confused and nobody thinks that they can find the truth, or a lot of people think they can't find the truth. And a big reason for that is because as people have denied that there's a God, well, what comes along with that is denying that we have been imbued with reason. Bishop Sheen talks about that here at the beginning of our reading. He says, everyone coming into the world has one great light sealed upon him, which is reason, or the faculty of knowing the true and the right. So if you deny that you have a soul, if you deny the existence of God, then you're not going to think that a supernatural being imbued you with reason, or anything for that matter. A lot of people who don't believe in God just think we're just a collection of cells, which we are. In some aspects, they're right about that. But we're just a collection of cells that happened by chance, and we just learn as we go. Nothing, was put upon us like reason and that light, that conscience that guides us. They just don't believe in anything having to do with that. And what I found, though, is with this denial that we can never find the truth, at the same time, everyone says that they want to hear the truth. But I think that's just a nice platitude people are saying just to sound reasonable, ironically. They say they want to find the truth and that they're so curious about the truth. But if you deny that there is any real truth, if you deny that there's any real absolute truths in the world, how can you even say that? And oftentimes on my social media account, it seems to me like the situation just turns into one of the scenes in the movie The Burbs. Have you ever seen The Burbs with Tom Hanks in it? It's a classic 80s movie. I absolutely love it. It's kind of like a dark comedy. It has so many hilarious scenes in it that my family loves to quote. But there's this one scene in the movie where Tom Hanks doesn't want to hear what his neighbor is telling him, and so he plugs his ears and he starts chanting, "I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to hear what you say." And so often I feel like that is what is happening in our modern world, especially on social media. Going back to that guy at the very beginning, as I was telling him stuff and kind of knocking down the wall that he kept putting up for me, it was like he was putting his fingers in his ear and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to you. I don't really want to hear the truth of what you're saying." So, as many of you know, I homeschool my kids. And one of the most important things to me is to teach them to seek truth. It's one of my top priorities. And I tell them, you have to seek the truth, even if it's hard and even if it's painful. And, I give them many examples from my own life where I have refused to listen to reason or listen to the truth. and instead desired more to cling to my pride and to mistruths in just an effort to make myself feel good. And this is really evident when my husband and I would argue about Catholicism, when we had the great debates of Protestantism versus Catholicism. I didn't want to use my reason. I didn't want to, because of what it would mean if I listened to the truth of what my husband was saying and if I dug deeper into it. Now, obviously, eventually those walls were knocked down, and I could not ignore reason anymore. And it's just like a bell gonging in my head, and I finally just had to pay attention. And it might have been easier for me to pay attention because my husband, is Catholic and was Catholic at the time. And so because he is my husband, I was a little bit more inclined to listen to him as time went on. But it is something that is difficult for us to do, is if we've believed in something our entire lives, or if we've believed something that we thought was true, when we hear something that goes against it, we automatically get defensive and we don't want to hear it because we don't want to realize that we were wrong, or we don't want to change our ways. And so here are 5 things that I teach my kids about finding truth. Number 1, the truth may be hard to find sometimes, but if we seek it earnestly, we can find it. We really can find it, contrary to what the world says. Number 2, the truth lies where consistency is found. Truth can never be contradictory. Examine an issue. If one argument contradicts itself, toss it away and move forward. You don't have to accept everybody's opinion. You don't have to accept everybody's argument. If you immediately can see that there's contradictions in the argument, you don't have to keep listening anymore. You can reject it and move on. Number 3, in seeking truth, many times we have to remove our emotions. Emotions cloud and emotions will deceive us. And those who argue an issue purely from emotion have often abandoned reason. And sometimes, we do have to understand why a person is emotional about an issue before we can discern whether they are speaking the truth on an issue or not. That is something that we have to take into account and explore and maybe get to the bottom of. But we cannot lead with our emotions. We shouldn't be robots, obviously, but too often our emotions get involved. Going back to when me and my husband would argue about Protestantism and Catholicism, I was very emotional about it. A lot of anger, embarrassment, a pride, obviously. I didn't want to be wrong. And so I had to learn to remove my emotions from it and just listen to what he was telling me and take what he was telling me and examine that and not examine how I was feeling about a situation. Number 4, ask questions. Like atheists, they love to peg Christians as being unintelligent or just brainwashed sheeple. But we have to remember that the most intelligent historical figures, almost all of them, were Christians. They asked questions. I mean, we've got Copernicus, Newton, Mendel, Lemaitre. These are just a few people. But there are literally thousands of scientists out there that have asked lots of questions, and they still remain Christians. In fact, it causes some of them to grow deeper into their faith, and it causes some atheists to become Christian because, like he talks about here on page 200, the one great scientist, Eddington, he became so enamored of his findings in mathematical physics that he ended up his scientific treatise with a chapter on mysticism And Bishop Sheen says that was going a bit far because that doesn't really have anything to do with, science. But what he acknowledged was that, the scientific world can only take us so far. And then philosophers come in and we have to start asking questions about the supernatural world. And can philosophy help us to answer those questions? Absolutely. And the number one thing that I teach my kids about finding the truth, number 5, is be humble enough to change your mind when what you once thought is found to be wrong. And here's the reality, and I think we're all feeling this right now in our current cultural climate. If we are unable to speak truth to each other and use our reason, or if we are unable to listen to each other, our relationships are going to be reduced to talks about meaningless stuff, just meaningless surface level stuff. Or if we actually try to get into an argument, we're just going to talk over each other's heads. And you notice how at every turn people get offended. And if we're constantly getting offended because our emotions are involved and we're not really using our reason and we're not truly serious about finding the truth, we say that just because it sounds good to say, how are we ever going to have fruitful discussions? Everything is considered offensive these days, which, of course, makes everything seem kind of pointless and meaningless, at least every conversation, because you can't ever get to the bottom of anything. Everything is contradictory, everybody's getting offended, nobody's really listening, nobody is truly trying to pursue the truth. And obviously when I say nobody, I'm speaking very generally. Obviously there are people, but collectively, as a whole, we're really struggling with this big time. And so we have to be a little more resilient, strong-minded. We have to be able to listen to things, take them in, and we have to use our reason to decide whether there's any truth to what someone's saying. And like I said before, if it's not true, then we can discard it. So here at the end, I want to give you the 4 kinds of people I have noticed in life. And as I'm talking about them, maybe think about where you would fit into one of these categories. So the first one is that there are those that are humble enough to listen to something new, even if it might make them uncomfortable. You can say to these people, hey, can I explain something to you? Or, hey, can I share with you a piece of new information on something? And they will allow you to speak. They will listen and they will take your words in, look like they're thinking about it. And these are very strong, confident, contemplative people. This doesn't mean that they always have to agree with everything somebody says, but they're at least willing to listen to people and be open to hearing something else. And they're not intimidated by that, because if they're sure about the fact that they are always trying to find the truth and that they, use their reason, then they're not scared if the truth shows them this path. They're not scared about that. These people are very rare. The second type of people are those who just kind of dance around the issue because they don't really want to hear what you have to say. And this can be because they don't want to get into an argument. Maybe they're non-confrontational type of people, or because, this is more often what it is, because they don't want what you have to say to make them squirm in their seat. If you offer to explain something, these kinds of people may just say, no, I'd rather not hear it, or they don't seem interested at all and won't really give you the time of day. And what I have found is that these type of people live in fear because they don't want you to challenge their preconceived notions. Many times they don't even know why they believe something. And so because they don't really know why, they can't defend it. And so they don't want to get into an argument with you. Or, like I said before, they they don't want you to make them uncomfortable and tell them something that may require them to change their behavior or their outlook on something. Then there are those types of people who allow you to speak, and we've all met these kind of people, but they are just waiting for the second when you take a breath so that they can give their rebuttal. They are not listening to you, and they are just waiting for their chance to prove you wrong. And oftentimes they'll trip themselves up, like the guy I told you about at the beginning, because he wasn't really interested in hearing what I had to say. He was more judging me without knowing anything about me. But he just wanted to show that he was smarter than me, and he didn't really want to hear what I had to say. Because even when I told him that I lived in Turkey, he was in no way interested in hearing about that. He actually then went on to tell me what it was like in Turkey, even though he had never been there. It's like, oh, well, okay. I don't even know everything about Turkey. I just lived there for 1 year, but I at least have some experience. And then, lastly, there are those that ask you questions, and when you present them with factual, truthful information that runs counter to the mistruth that they actually have believed, they will still choose to believe the untruth. And there's no other way to put it, but this is just a level of intellectual dishonesty, and oftentimes it's rooted in pain and a lot of emotions. And so it's best to just end a discussion, end an argument. Once somebody has shown you that they're just not going to change their mind, even if you presented them with the truth, because they just don't want to. And there's not much you can do there. So maybe do some self-examination, see which one you are. And we should all be striving for number one, the first person that I talked about. But really, we have to understand that God has given us the gift of reason. And that gives us insight. And that helps to shine a light on the truth of things. And so as we go through life and we make discoveries, maybe not scientific discoveries, but as we make discoveries about different things, different issues in our lives, if we trust in the reason that God has given us, and we have faith that the Holy Spirit will guide us, and we allow our reason and our faith to illuminate issues and things that come up, then we can trust that God is going to set us on a path, where we can discover the truth of something. He's just not going to leave us floundering. And so that's something that we all have to remember. But that is it for this week, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for week 58. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.